EA Sports. It's in the game.
Fighting video games have had their ups and downs in terms of popularity, but can largely credit most of their success to the mainstream craze that was Street Fighter II in 1991. While they've come a long way since then, the idea has remained largely the same. It's just you and an opponent duking it out until only one remains. It's one of time's oldest tales, tracing back to the gladiators of ancient Rome. The biggest differences are now you don't have to dedicate your whole life to training in order to win, and you don't have to sustain any real-life injuries or die. Thanks, technology. While I thoroughly enjoyed the likes of Super Smash Bros. Melee and Soul Calibur 2 growing up, those video games felt like just that, games. And for the longest time, that's the only style of fighting game I knew. That is until 2006 when EA released what is still to this day one of my favorite sports games, Fight Night Round 3. Fight Night Round 3 was my first taste of a realistic fighting game. At the time of their release, GeForce said it had the best graphics they've ever seen on a video game. It was also my first online gaming experience. Of course, online gaming was still a thing before 2006. Games like Halo 2 and Star Wars Battlefront were making waves in this new industry, but the internet wasn't really good enough to handle the tight precision required for a fighting game. Some people were still using dial-up internet at this point, and fighting games require next to no latency. Luckily, the Xbox 360 revolutionized online gaming with Xbox Live. With this premium subscription that was Xbox Live Gold, you were given access to a premium service that allowed for servers that could handle a fighting game. EA was fortunate enough to release Fight Night Round 3 just 3 months after the release of the Xbox 360, and Microsoft unintentionally did something that created a massive online community for this game, and that was including a headset with the Xbox 360. Now you might be wondering, how could a headset have impacted the success of a video game? But it's what people did with that headset that created the online competitive community. Trash talk. Love it or hate it, trash talk is a big part of sports, but the sweet science isn't like other sports. In basketball, you could sit on the bench for the entire 48 minutes while watching your teammates win a game, making trash talk a lot less justified. In combat sports, you only win if you specifically were better than your opponent, aside from the occasional sketchy judging. This leads to the real feeling of glory and real consequences from that trash talk. Simply put, the stakes are much higher, and those higher stakes led to online matches being highly competitive and addicting. Most people think that online trash talk stemmed from the toxic lobbies of Modern Warfare 2, but I'd argue that Fight Night really influenced this a few years prior. Now, as much fun as trash talk is, it alone can't make a good game. What made Fight Night Round 3 special was its incredibly tight and fluid gameplay, which found the perfect balance of skill and simplicity. Easy to learn, difficult to master, just like throwing a punch. The only real criticism I could find on this game was the amount of product placement, but I mean, come on, it's EA Sports and boxing. What do you expect? Tight gameplay mechanics, cutting-edge graphics, a dedicated online community, and on top of all this, the game features a fantastic roster. Manny Pacquiao, Marvin Hagler, Muhammad Ali, the list goes on. After the success of Fight Night Round 3, EA Sports released both Fight Night Round 4 in 2009 and then Fight Night Champion in 2011. Though the games might not be as close to my heart as Round 3, they both received critical acclaim and were massive successes. So this brings us to the question, why is it that it's been over 10 years since the last true boxing game? What happened to boxing video games? Well, simply put, it's the same thing that happened to the sport of boxing: money and business. When you look at the top 10 ranked boxers in any division, you are likely to notice a similarity in their records: 0 losses. This is because from a casual fan's perspective, the undefeated record makes a fighter seem really good, though that's almost never the case. Unfortunately, the casual fans make up a large majority of the fans, and that's what the fighters care about. The more hype they can bring, the more they can market themselves, and the more money they can make. It's extremely rare to see a situation where 2 fighters in the top 10 fight one another, because boxers are so afraid of losing that undefeated record and the money that comes with it. Boxers only pick fights they think they can win because they are independent contractors, and they're trying to make as much money as possible. This is different from a sport like MMA, where the promotion, most well known being the UFC, will ensure that the best fighters always fight the best fighters. If you're the champion of a division in the UFC, you're contractually obligated to defend your belt against the next person in line, and if you choose not to, you're likely to be stripped of that title. Modern boxing has become such a money grab and a farce that you will almost never see a champion defend their title against someone who is actually deserving of a title shot. This is the equivalent of the LA Lakers bookmakers going 82-0 in a season because they chose to play against an NCAA team every night. With these boxers being independent contractors, just like having no obligation to fight the true number one contender, they are also under no obligation to be put in video games, and in fact can demand egregious amounts of money or even ownership in the company to be featured. This is why a boxing video game can have a great roster but never a perfect one, because at the end of the day, the company has a budget they could spend on fighters, and if they can't come to terms with a fighter, they move on to the next one. Could you imagine a UFC video game without Conor McGregor or an NBA video game without LeBron James? It just wouldn't work. The sport of boxing has been on a mostly steady decline for the past 20 years, and it has been over 10 years since the release of the last real boxing video game, but there is hope for the sport. Ryan Garcia and Tank Davis is set to take place in April. The ever-annoying Jake Paul is bringing completely new eyes to the sport, and the beta footage of the new Undisputed Boxing game looks very promising. Still, as a fan of the sport and of boxing video games, I'm a skeptic until the game is officially released and in my hands, and that Garcia-Davis super fight actually takes place. Also, don't expect to see Floyd Money Mayweather in Undisputed Boxing. It's just probably not going to happen. Thank you guys so much for watching. I know I usually talk about action or RPG games on this channel, but once in a while I'll talk about a game just because it meant a lot to me growing up, even if it's a sports game. With that being said, like every video, I'm giving away a copy of Fight Night Round 3. If you have some friends over, I highly recommend popping this game in. It is an absolute blast to play, and it's highly competitive. Unfortunately, couch co-op is the only way you can play multiplayer, but Fight Night Champion is on Xbox Game Pass and the EA servers are back up for that game. To any of my viewers out there who have been aching for a new Fight Night game, let's just hope that Undisputed Boxing can carry that heavy torch.